Hi, everyone, and welcome to our B2B webinar with LucidWorks and Google Cloud, From Hype to Reality, Implementing AI in B2B Commerce. Thank you for joining us. My name is Teresa Kuski. I'm the Senior Director of Digital Marketing at Chamfer, and I will be moderating this session today. Joining me, I have our first speaker is Roman Tejada, the Applied AI Lead for Big Box Retail at Google Cloud, Chris Cottle, the marketing leader at LucidWorks, Brian Land, the VP of Global Solution Engineering at LucidWorks, and Anna Bennett, the VP of IT at Test Equity Group. In a rapidly evolving technological landscape, B2B commerce leaders are inundated with buzz around all the AI things, AI, generative AI, ML, and amidst all this hype, it's critical to identify the tangible benefits these technologies offer and implement them effectively. This webinar aims to demystify AI and generative AI, providing a clear roadmap for where to start, the key business challenges they address, and the technologies that truly make an impact. So I wanted to start this discussion today with just getting a sense for where everyone is at in this stage of their AI adoption. So maybe, Chris, you can get us started with what stage of AI adoption are you in at your company, and what is your role in the overall execution?
Sure. I'm happy to talk with everyone. And it's a good question. Where are we at? Well, we're sort of in the middle, meaning one, we're a company that's using AI. We're also a vendor that's developing and deploying AI. So in my department and my role, we're pretty advanced. We're using it a lot in lots of different ways. As a company, we're deploying it across lots of different parts of our business. But as a vendor, we've had to be ahead of the game with thought leadership and benchmark studies and some complex research. And we're deploying products that are complex that are utilizing AI right now. So we're kind of all over the board in various stages. And that's why we're very attuned to what's been happening and what people are seeing for success and not success. And, my role is having my foot into a lot of that, and not only in the research, but in the utilization of it, et cetera. My colleague, Brian Land here, he's in the thick of it, hearing from clients and working with clients on how they're deploying AI and what they're doing with us, but in other areas too.
I think that's a good segue for Brian. Brian, you want to
Awesome.
give us your take?
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, Brian. So a little bit of background in my role, we're working with our customers to deploy Gen AI with in terms of search. So search meaning for retailers, for enhanced search, chatbot recommendations, generative answers as well. So, so we've gone through, and our team does typically in the early days, like POCs, proof of concepts, and pilots. And so we're seeing a lot of interest in I would say, last couple of years. And it keeps growing. So, a couple of years ago, it was once a month. Now it's every single conversation is, someone's been mandated on the other side at a customer site, like, hey, we're really exploring Gen AI. Like, how do we utilize Gen AI in terms of search and customer engagement, whether it be helping them to move the needle on their conversion rates and revenue, or service their customers better with a better FAQ answer, knowledge-based customer support type of thing. So that's what, I'm in the world of let's prove it internally and deploy any Gen AI model. So our technology Fusion works with any Gen AI model. And what's important is not just a selection of the right model, but making sure you put the guardrails in place, and guardrails meaning really precise answers. It's not answering a question about their competitors' products, for example, or asking a generic question that you can ask on ChatGPT, like, who won the Super Bowl this year? We want to make sure and put those guardrails in place, and also security. If there's any security concerns, that's a big part of these type of proof type projects that we're working on.
Great. Thanks. Anna, do you want to go next?
I do. That's great. Thanks, Teresa. So thanks for having me. From the Test Equity Group perspective, we are at an early stage of AI adoption. So we've been leveraging AI for things like product recommendations for some time, but we are working on other AI and Gen AI use cases internally. and some customer facing as well. We have not launched them yet, so they're still in the early stages, but yeah, very excited about the opportunity to get some of these out there and start seeing some of that ROI.
Roman?
Yes, thanks, Teresa. And like you mentioned, I'm the lead for Big Box AI go-to-market at Google Cloud, which means that I work with the largest retailers to help them infuse AI into their roadmaps. And all that is to say that to answer your question, at Google Cloud, we're all about helping customers accelerate their AI adoption, no matter where they are on that path. Right? Some customers are just starting to explore the possibilities, while others are already deploying AI at scale. And so my role within that is to understand their unique needs and challenges and guide them towards the right technologies that will drive real business value in the short and long term. And so that could be personalizing marketing campaigns with customer segmentation models or streamlining customer service with intelligent chatbots. We're seeing all of those use cases right now, and we're committed to helping them unlock the full potential of AI.
I want to stay on you, Roman, because, obviously Google being a very big company that has invested a lot of money and time into AI. But, as we get into the more Gen AI landscape, do you have any examples that you could share of Gen AI in action and how that differs from other, forms of AI?
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of it being different from other more traditional forms of AI, like let's say predictive AI, or even like more recently agentic AI, I feel like generative is where things get really creative. Think of AI not just as analyzing data, but actually creating something new based on that data, right? We're seeing used to generate everything from personalized marketing copy and product descriptions to even realistic images and videos that might also be attached to, like, let's say, a catalog in retail. And so that's a game changer, obviously, for the industry that I work in, where you can automate content creation basically at scale and while still maintaining a personalized touch. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that did. And I think maybe Chris might be a good one too to follow up on that, just because from the, a marketing perspective, which I live and breathe that as well too. It's figuring out what are some of the best use cases. But anything that you can share from that front?
Yeah, well, I'll share two different aspects. One is kind of what we, and I think a lot of marketing teams who are more progressive, are doing. And we've always loved AI and even ML, machine learning, the algorithms, they've helped us a lot. But really, a couple of years ago, when things started taking off with generative AI, and it's called generative because it generates an answer or some script or text or images or whatever. That's the part that has been really interesting. If you think about a marketing group, we would be one of those groups that would feel most threatened by something like this. And yet most of the groups are thriving because we're able to do our jobs even faster, even better. And so, we use text summarization. We'll put copy into generative AI all the time and say, please restate this, so that we look for creative ways that it might be said more efficiently. And so it helps us do our job better and faster, et cetera. I personally love going to all these online meetings lately, and I can get a transcript after and a summarization of who has the assignments. Strange, my name is often on those assignments, which I don't remember in the conversation. But anyway, it's a beautiful time to be alive. I don't have any fear about it. I have two daughters who are graphic designers, and I've talked to them about, are you worried about AI taking your job? And they're like, no, it's just helping us do it much better. So it's very promising. That's the view from the angle as a marketing person. Now, as the angle from, what should the average company be doing to figure out how do we utilize AI? One, there's a lot of tools in your current technology stack that probably have AI that are coming out. You should look at those and say, how could it make us better, faster, stronger? But then also, how are you offering something that can be supplemented by AI? If you're a billing company, for example, could you have AI do a text summarization of what the bill is all about rather than just some numbers and 5 codes? Make it more user-friendly, improve the customer experience. If you're not having a council at your organization that asks the question, how can Gen AI help us move our business forward? You're probably missing something. You should do that.
I agree. I 100% think that it's a company-wide initiative, and it's not just limited to the marketing or IT department. It is really inclusive of the entire company in so many different ways. How many of us use technology and software in our everyday lives? Like every one of us do. So it's definitely a good point. Anna or Brian, do you want to add on to that?
Again, this is Brian here. I can add some of the examples of generative AI in action that we're working with our customers, especially if you think in B2B. One thing that's really hitting a hot button is in B2B, you might have, okay, you're searching for a product or a part, and that's product content or structured content, but usually it's a company with unstructured content. Think about an installation document, engineering manual. Some of these documents can be 20, 30 pages. And if you think about the buyer journey, the customer journey, they may have to open up a document, find their answer. Is this the right product? Or get more information about a how-to, right? And so generative AI is really great at two things. One is summarizing. And so as you ingest that document into a Gen AI-based solution, you can summarize a document and also build question answer pairs. Think about like that as a FAQ. So that's a really key piece there. The other piece is around is a co-pilot fashion. Let's say you're on the PDP page on a B2B site and you have technical questions or any type of question, but start asking those types of questions. And that would break usually just basic keyword search. But generative AI is really great at generating a response. That's the generative piece in that Gen AI piece of the puzzle. But yeah, there's so many different examples that we can get into.
And just to add to what Brian just said, there's what you can develop, and then there are all the offerings that the platforms you're using, your vendors are coming up with, right? Because this is the new thing. So just being out there, talking to your vendors, understanding like, what are you offering that's probably already in the platform I'm using that I can start leveraging, like, summarization, content creation. So it's just a matter of engaging and seeing what you want to try out from what's available already.
Awesome. So how do we distinguish between the hype around AI and practical real world examples? I mean, I am just amazed at every day how many different tools and new like models are being built, and Grok 2 just was released with the Flux guy, but it's an image generation. Is there, do any of you guys have any suggestions around, how to like test and explore, but yet, how to really put it into practice?
Sure. This is Brian again. I can provide, again, 2-year journey here in our Gen AI experience. But in the early days, I think some of the early adopters may have done too much, and they were trying to mimic perhaps a ChatGPT model. Ask any question, get an answer. And you have to be careful with that. You do need those guardrails. Chris mentioned that earlier. And there's been a couple of public examples. You may have seen the news releases around Chevrolet.com. Someone was able to buy a Chevy Tahoe for $1. They basically, prompted, not necessarily hacked, but was able to constrain that response to purchase a Tahoe for $1. The other one was, I think, Canadian Airlines, where a GPT-based chatbot gave an incorrect response on free bereavement travel. And that subsequently went to court, and the customer won that case. And so you have to be careful of that. There's a little bit of hype early on, and a lot of our customers being very careful. They want to implement things like RAG, which is a retrieval augmented generation. And so I talked about the generative response in an earlier example, but the retrieval is very important. So if you can select the right documents and the right data to provide the response, you're going to get a much more precise answer. So that's one piece of the guardrail. And the other piece of the guardrail, you can use security trimming, only use your catalog, only use your pricing, the pricing component of your catalog. So you can't buy that Tahoe for $1. So, definitely these projects are very deep, and we're looking at what guardrails need to be put in place. And, so we don't kind of fall into the hype cycle in the early days anyway.
Yeah. Yep. That's great. Roman, do you, or Chris, and I'm not sure which one, but I feel like Roman, you might have some good also use case examples.
Yeah, and you know, let me start by recognizing that the hype around AI, especially Gen AI, is real, right? Like the reason I'm having all of these top-to-top engagements and you know the practical applications are exciting, but people keep talking about Gen AI and like I keep thinking to cut through the noise. I tend to look for concrete examples of where AI is solving real business problems, not just theoretical possibilities of what people get excited about, right? So, for example, we've seen retailers use AI-powered catalog enrichment, which is basically if you have a product and it has attributes, you don't know if those are the right attributes or if they're correct, if they actually have consistency with the product manual, or maybe they're empty. And that leads to a significant reduction in return, obviously, in terms of costs. But I also see it, and this is where I get excited about the practical side, right? I see that as the foundation of Gen AI journey. Let's call it that way, because, and I say that because if you have a good catalog, right, your data, your foundational data on your products is correct, then that means better search and recommendations as well. That also means better retrieval when you're doing things like conversational AI. That even means better marketing asset content generation, and it can even tie into use cases in supply chain. So I feel like a lot of customers, to the point earlier, they jump to these use cases where it's a little more advanced and they might not necessarily have that foundation in place. And I always try to steer it, you know, guide questions and things like that, that we need to start with a solid data foundation. That's where the true value of AI gets started, at least.
But nobody's data is perfect. So what is good enough, right? So now, Chris, did you want something to add?
I was just going to say, I agree with what Roman talked about. There's a lot of hype for sure. We at LucidWorks, we did a global benchmark study. It's the second year we did it. Did one last year, did one this year. About 4 months ago, we launched the outcome. It's about 6,000 folks, so pretty good study. And these are people involved in the decision making on generative AI. So they're right at the heart of what we're talking about. And last year when we asked the question, we got a very different response. This year when we asked them about what is the success rate of your Gen AI initiatives, I'm just looking at the screen here to get this right. The top two leaders were in interesting areas. Out of 5 categories, they were decreasing G&A expense, so fairly successful, feeling like 1 in 3 of those initiatives were seeing success, and establishing AI governance. I guess that's not a big surprise because it's early and the hype is there. So people are like, okay, let's not go too far. Let's figure out how to govern this. The 3 other areas that I think will come up and become the mainstay of where people see success are increasing just the revenue overall of the business as a result of a Gen AI implementation, reducing customer-facing costs and lowering your OpEx overall. So we talk about hype, and you know, one of the things that is important that's already been said is to tying it to a business value. And if I had any advice for anyone that asked me about it, I would say start simple and small with a clear business objective, and then choose the right partners and technology to help you go. You know, one of our partners is Google Cloud. They're a co-sponsor of this webinar. They have lots of great technology. We hear Roman speaking, et cetera. The folks on the call have their own technology partners, et cetera. But each of those has some technology, some opportunity to help you possibly with large language models, which are basically the fuel for generative AI being successful. There's a lot to choose and a lot to select. So in the midst of all the hype, there is a way through it by choosing the right simple program. Hey, we're going to go try this. We're going to do a point of a proof of value, a POV, or some sort of pilot, and then seeing that through. And those don't have to be long. They don't have to be expensive, and they don't have to be very risky.
That's great. I wanted to, so actually perfect segue into like how you get your journey started. And I know I've read a lot of stats around how many people, it's funny because, you know, ChatGPT launched 2022, your survey from 2023, the results to then 2024 of like 93% were going to invest in AI to then in 2024, now 63%. It's like, it was all the hype and everyone's putting all their money into the AI basket, but yet now it's like, oh, I don't know. I think there's a few things that, you know, contribute to that, and, you know, cost, security, some of the things, Brian, you know, you guys have mentioned. But I think it's a good segue. So how can businesses define clear business objectives and metrics to measure these initiatives? And do you have any examples? Because I think that's one thing it's easy to say, do that, but I think finding concrete examples and kind of bringing that to your C-suite and discussing like how that could be executed or tested, explored, and executed. But the primary, business objective is super important. So anyone want to jump in there?
Sure, I can jump in. It's Brian. So before Gen AI, we'd always establish our business objectives, and usually it starts at the very top. We're looking to drive revenue, reduce costs, or increase customer CSAT typically. And Gen AI, it's a great new technology. It can help with that for sure. And so but let's say we want to increase revenue. And so some of the metrics we use were, all right, are you increasing your add to cart rate or even click-through rate on your products and PDPs? Are you trying to drive increased average order value? And that comes through recommendations. Roman talked about how he's doing some Gen AI with recommendations. And Gen AI recommendations are really good. It's probably going to drive, essentially drive more average order values because customers will see, hey, I'm looking for this product, but I also need this other 1, 2, 3, and put in your cart. And but there are other things too when you're looking at increasing your CSAT and in your customer service use case, you may want to drive, for example, increased clicks in your knowledge base. Average read time goes up. All right, I'm finding the right knowledge article and I'm reading it and I'm solving my problem versus creating a customer support case on the website. And so that business driver is really around agent case deflection. So how many cases are you deflecting internally in my call center? And so you may be trending at, say, 1,000 customer cases a day after deploying Gen AI. Is that reduced by 20, 30, 40%? So what are the goals? So, that's really important to define the goals. Are you looking to decrease your internal customer support cases, increase read time when your customers are actually reading your knowledge-based articles and not getting frustrated and bouncing? Or is it driving more revenue? So on the revenue side, like I mentioned, with better Gen AI based recommendations, maybe a generative response. So I'm searching for something, I find my list of products, but I'm also generating a response on top of that. And so you're engaging the customer more. They're actually learning things more than just seeing the list of products. They're actually seeing what they're trying to find and maybe even uncover some new insights as an end user, as a customer. That's really key. So that business goal may roll up to not only increasing customer sat, but having a higher level engagement and building brand loyalty now. Now I really trust this site. I'm getting really great information here. I'm not bouncing and go to a competitor site.
Yeah, I really love that you mentioned customer satisfaction, because I do think that that's a key indicator and everyone's North Star, right? As far as like, what does the customer think and feel and want to, the actions are subsequent to that with the orders and the add to carts and stuff. And oftentimes I find people are really focused on just the revenue metric or the conversion metric. And it's like, we don't always remember or think about the customer satisfaction side of things. So I love that you mentioned that. Anna, do you have any use cases or any examples or key metrics that you've used that have been successful?
We're similar to what Brian mentioned, right? Really just trying to drive business. And as you mentioned, echoing the customer satisfaction. I think what he also mentioned regarding clear business objectives, right? From the beginning, it's not like, okay, there's AI, where can we put it so that we can say that we're using AI? There has to be a business need that the technology is going to really solve for that business need. And this is how we're going to measure it in the end. And this is how it's going to get us the results that we need. But you have to start with the business need. Just relating to what Chris mentioned, just specific, focused. You don't want to boil the ocean. You want to really start with something manageable that you can run a pilot, get a quick win, really show the value. The way you show the value is by having those clearly defined metrics that
Mhm.
anybody can understand, and customer satisfaction rating or revenue. Those are easy ones to sell, right?
Mhm. I know we were talking a little bit prior to this, and as far as high impact pilot projects, you were talking about like a way to pick the best shipping options, and this was in regarding, I think, Amazon. Can you tell me more a little bit about
Yeah, for
that
sure.
pilot
So
project?
one of the projects that we embarked on was trying to find the best shipping rate for our Amazon orders. And we used AI to accomplish this. We had to find a really focused scenario, right? A use case. We're just going to try and get the best rate for Amazon orders. We didn't try to get every order, right? We started small, and also set a metric as far as to what success looked like. We knew we were not going to get 100% of the orders right. There were some that we're not going to get right. So defining that, hey, as long as 90% of the choices that this automation is making are good, meaning it picked the lowest price, then we're calling this a success, right? So again, if you go with the 100, we knew we were never going to get there. But starting with a realistic, achievable metric, something easy to measure, right? Did we get it right? Did we get it wrong? We have all the data available for us to be able to clearly show, yes, this was a success. And in the end, getting that buy-in, right? That comfort level. Sometimes the business is not comfortable with a 90%. They really want that 100%. So starting to negotiate early on and saying, we're not going to get to that 100%, right? But can we agree on 90? And that is what we're calling success. That made a big difference. Setting expectations, the metrics from the beginning, and getting that buy-in from the business was definitely.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. Anyone else have an example of a pilot project and the success, specific use case?
Yeah.
Want to share?
The low-hanging fruit for our team is really just summarizations. And so that's indexing. So once you index your product catalog or the non-product content, you can summarize it and enrich it. That seems to be a really easy, quick win, especially the non-product content like the engineering manuals and any type of document PDF. I know the product catalog enrichment needs to be, there's a workflow involved in terms of approving that, but that's definitely some key successes. And then generative responses as well. But again, then we need to put those guidelines in, the guardrails for those generative responses.
Roman, anyone else? Otherwise, we can move on.
There's a lot of really good things that have been mentioned on the consumer facing side, and obviously the top line metrics are always top of mind for executives, coverage, engagement, uplift, click-through rate. I wouldn't discount some of the more back office use cases where also there's interesting, success metrics that again need to be defined earlier. But things like evaluating supplier documents at scale or damage detection, that's, we're also seeing a lot of that. And like I said, focusing on measurable outcomes like increased efficiency, improved consumer experiences, or internal associate experiences is really key. Or even if you have your own team of, like, let's say data scientists, machine learning engineers you're looking to deploy, establishing the metrics there as well, like 70% reduced time in preparing data or deploying models or faster model explainability. These also matter, especially when the I part is being scrutinized in the ROI. That's what.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so we kind of talked about the just adoption piece. Now I kind of want to jump into technologies to invest in and asking, each one of you too, or like, what are the platforms, technology, software, AI solutions or Gen AI solutions too that you guys are looking at or have invested in or have been testing out and using? Chris, do you want to start there?
Sure, absolutely. I think one of one of the places to start here is to, I've referenced this study that we did. One of the questions was asked is, where are your concerns around Gen AI and the technologies? This year, the number one concern was data security. And then the second concern was implementation costs, and then decision transparency, those sorts of things. How do those answers relate to the technology that you'd pick? Well, I mentioned earlier that the fuel for generative AI, the thing that really makes it happen, is something called large language models, or LLMs, which there's a lot of them. They're trained by data scientists, and they're the ones, they're so important. They're getting more and more specialized, et cetera. But there's a cost to pinging those, and people have a lot of questions around the data security side, which was the number one concern, and also the implementation cost. Those are real, they're practical, but you can very much get through them. So choosing the right large language model or language model that you're going to utilize, there's a bunch of them out there. Google has a Google Model Garden, and there's lots of available. There's public. You've all heard of ChatGPT and OpenAI, et cetera. They're out there. They're wonderful. But there's also private models that you can bring and train. I'm not a model expert, but as a business buyer, I'm very much aware that you're not necessarily locked into one thing. You can find something that is right-sized for you. The other thing that really hits on this data security around choosing the right technology is people, if you don't know it well, you might say, well, does all of our data, when we use a model, is that model, especially if it's public, is it using our data? And is that being used to train the model? Is that going to show up from other people? I'm going to have a security issue. That's why data security is the number one thing, right? But if you get the right parameters in place, especially with a private model, you can train the model on just your data, and it will only show responses relative to your data. So if you have a competitive question, you're using a chatbot or whatever, and you don't necessarily need to be worried that if somebody asks a generalized question on your chatbot on your site, that it's going to provide an answer from a competitor that's even better than yours. No, it's trained, it's got guardrails, it's parametered. So choosing the right technology, it can be complex and overwhelming, but that's why you choose a good partner.
Anyone else want to jump in? Roman, Anna, Brian?
Yeah, I think I can give a perspective from Google's side. There's a lot of good options out there, but obviously I'm a little bit biased towards Google Cloud's Vertex AI. And this is where I need to keep myself from sounding salesy, but let me actually flip the script and start more from a customer perspective. We've worked on thousands of use cases, and obviously we've picked a few things along the way. And if I had to boil it down to 4 success factors that customers care about when thinking about a platform or a tool that they want to use, right? We boil it down to 4 critical things. The first one is optionality and choice. And I think it was mentioned just now as well. Customers need a platform that gives you the freedom to experiment and innovate basically without getting locked into a single stack or model. And the second one is differentiation, right? So everyone's got data scientists and engineers and their own data. So how do you set apart yourself using those assets? Third, future proofing. I've had customers come to me and say, I spent 10 months with a large engineering team building my own DIY rack pipeline, only to realize that everything changed 6 months later, and now it's not scalable or cost effective, right? Having a platform that evolves with the technology lets you focus on the more creative side of actually creating value, right? Not reinventing the wheel. And then finally, I feel like just the concern over the years of enterprise readiness is not going away anytime soon. Security, privacy, responsible AI, all of those guardrails are important. They're not just buzzwords. And again, this is where I'll come back to Vertex AI. I have seen Vertex AI tick all of those boxes.
There's a couple of things you and Chris both touched on, and I don't want to dive into it deeply, but I do want to ask how many of you have an AI policy or guideline at least, because I think that's important when you're starting your AI journey, because there are stats out there that say, I mean, even if whether you like it or not, whether you know it or not, a good chunk or majority of your employees are using some sort of Gen AI solution. And so I think that's kind of where I wanted to just kind of ask everyone, do you have your own, and probably LucidWorks and Google do.
I'll take this one first, Teresa.
And Anna, I know you kind of said, yeah.
Yeah. So we started with guidelines last year after doing a little bit of research within our organization and figuring that our user base is leveraging these tools. So we need to help them, provide them some tools, some guidance as to, you know, what are good practices, what we should be concerned about, what are some of the risks. So we started with a set of guidelines that we published and distributed within our employee base. And then 6 months later, we reviewed them and we provided an update. And we're currently working on our policy. It is in a draft form, but we hope to have it available very soon. But we've only seen the use increase as we keep monitoring, you know, our employee base. It's inevitable. People are leveraging the technology that's available. So we need to make sure we're establishing a policy and helping guide them.
Well, and most of the tools are free, or they're free for a little while, or they're pretty cheap to just buy too. So, I mean, inevitably, a lot of employees are just doing, I mean, on a daily basis, I'm using ChatGPT, Claude 3, Meta, I mean, Perplexity. I'm testing all of those solutions, not to mention just other software solutions that have AI or Gen AI integrated into them too. So, I mean, it's definitely a good point that I think everyone in the audience should consider and be thinking about as well if they haven't yet. And that's a great place to start.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, Teresa. Part of the, sorry, am I audible?
Yep, go ahead.
I was just going to say that's an excellent point, and to add on to that, as part of the policy, decide what you're going to allow and what you want to maybe block or protect your group from, right? Mm-hmm. Decide that early on.
Let's move on to, I know data is a big topic, obviously. Roman, you talked about using it for product data enrichment. Brian and Chris, you guys use it from a marketing and from an engineering perspective in a lot of like the data and search. What are, you know, as far as like the data integration and orchestration of the tools that contribute to the effectiveness of AI implementations? Or just how do we make that more effective?
I could take that one. And again, our team deploys these projects in the field, and the data is really important. And that's a big challenge. Even as data science, let's say you had a DIY team building it themselves, data integration and ingestions is a challenge. And then once you get that, there's usually some transformation work, and then you're ready to play with Gen AI and test some things. So yeah, having connectors is really important to you know, solid connectors that can get at the data, can have perhaps some transformation and enrichment along the way, and then from there you can start to build your prompts and put your guardrails in place and things like that. So we're seeing a large number of vendors out there, including us. You know, we have, you know, over hundreds and hundreds of connectors. So connect any data, should be data agnostic. And usually it's not coming from one system. We have some projects where it's coming from half a dozen or even a dozen different data sources. And they all have different connectors. They have different keys and transformation capabilities. But once the data is in, then you can start applying the magic of the Gen AI pieces.
Anybody else want to add to that? Otherwise, we can, I think, Chris, you kind of touched on something when we were talking about like building a case study and just like some really good steps to even, you know, think about when you're getting started, aside from maybe like thinking about AI policy and guidelines. But, you know, you were talking about, you know, first looking at vendors. And I think that's an important piece too. So I don't know if there's anything you wanted to share around how to build a business case.
Yeah, I'd be happy to chat briefly about that. Firstly, don't be too scared and don't underestimate the power of back of the napkin math. So a lot of people feel like a business case needs to stand up to scrutiny of the board of directors. You know, if you feel that way, okay, fine. But at the end of the day, you got to start somewhere. So, you know, we're very comfortable, and I'm always very comfortable going to my leadership with sort of like, here's some back of the napkin math that I think would make this worth us taking the next step. So it doesn't have to be this encompassing thing, but we've talked, and Anna talked about this a minute ago and others, but I'm just looking at a list here of some of these key areas that you could build a business case around, where the outcome is maybe we're going to try to increase revenue, or maybe we're going to try to decrease G&A expenses or OpEx. So you could look at things like, how can it help us acquire new customers or grow existing customer base, sell new products, improve our pricing and margin? And that could be AI or generative AI that can help you there. You could lower OpEx by lowering your procurement spend or offering more efficient production, improving your labor efficiency. Things like these tech summarization that Brian has talked about, that we've seen a lot of success with. It's very simple. It's an easy one to get implemented. It knocks it out of the park if you have the right large language model, and you can control and confine the responses. That has a direct impact on support, services, lowering ticket, faster resolutions. Like, those are easy ones to do. Decreasing the G&A expense. You could do things like decrease technology, decrease HR expense, decrease capital expenses. So there's a lot of ideas, and just sit down with your finance person and do some back of the napkin math for 20 minutes, and you'll be in a really good spot. That's what I found works well, is just get the ball rolling.
Great. Anyone else?
I just want to piggyback
I have
on that.
one kind of point too. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think everything's being mentioned, from setting realistic expectations, making sure that you understand why we're doing the things that we're doing, and also, iterating and learning. I think there's something to be said about facing large efforts, because again, people have this visionary, view on what's going to happen when AI goes to production. But setting phases, and even sometimes like granularly setting expectations and measurable outcomes metrics for each of those phases, can be really key. And again, clearing that business case stage, because then people are aligned on what to expect when, even for a larger effort if it's chunked into phases.
One thing and I think there is a lot to talk about from that perspective. Does anyone have any training programs or things for all of your employees that has helped people up to speed on AI literacy?
Yeah. One thing, I'll jump in, I'm sure others have them, but our product and sales enablement groups and our training groups have provided 101 type trainings to our folks, not only in sales and in product, but on the CS groups as well, just to get everyone familiar with the terms, feeling comfortable how to talk about it. Plus, there's just a bunch of really good learning modules out there on the web through common programs that we all know and like. And so it's a great time to learn about it, and we're far enough in that there's a lot of good resources.
And do you guys have anything that you do at
We
your
do.
organization?
Our training team is fantastic about finding very simple to digest, basic level courses, and they're available for, they're not mandatory at the moment, but they are available for our user base, our employees, to take. And we actually have groups that get together and talk about the training. So one of the training was for Gen AI specifically, kind of showed you the basics. This is how you use it. This is what it is. These are the risks. And then you have groups of people talking about sharing experiences and like, hey, have you tried this? Have you tried that? Or did you ever consider, this risk or putting this data out there? Where is it going? So just seeing those types of conversations happening within the organization is very exciting. And it just starts from, again, just very digestible, bite-sized training, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, to get people thinking about it, and to get people a little comfortable, as Chris mentioned, with the language and just the vocabulary of how to talk about this has been very helpful.
That's great. Yeah, I know that I have spent a lot of time trying to make sure that the C-suite and also just everyone on the team is generally educated and knows has a base understanding. I don't know if anyone has read the book, The Digital Mindset, but the premise of that book is really to get to a level of a 30% understanding. And I think if you at least understand the base, like software, the architecture and how it's built, but not necessarily all of the intricacies, you'll at least get to a point where you can build off of that. So the 30% rule is a good one, because I think people feel like they need to know everything sometimes when it comes to AI and generative AI. So I wanted to ask last two couple of questions, maybe two more questions. One of them is, what are some best practices or key learnings? I mean, I'm sure not every project has like hit the ground running and was a success. So anyone can share?
Sure, I can share some of our key learnings in some of the projects over the last couple of years. And they've evolved over time because the Gen AI space is quickly changing. It seems like every month or every couple of months. But one is around total cost of ownership. And I would say a year ago, 2 years ago, it was actually pretty expensive to deploy a Gen AI app in terms of like the number of tokens you have to pay each of the LLM vendors. Since then, they've dramatically dropped. And so we're already, even a few months ago, 6 months ago, we've experienced some key learnings where, watch out for the expense, keep a tight control. Are you getting the value? So it's a pure ROI type of analysis. But we've done some workarounds in the field, like use a very high-priced, high-quality large language model to generate a lot of data, and then store that data in a system like a vector database, which we include in Fusion, and that will reduce your total cost. Summarizations, that's a one-time index hit. It's like as you're pulling data in, you create these summarizations. That's only a one-time large language model hit versus a chatbot. Every time you get an answer from a chatbot, that's an expense. And so, that seems to be that one key piece is around watch out for total cost of ownership. And the other key piece is around security. Again, the old Tahoe for $1 and the Canadian Airways example. So making sure you're grounding we have pipelines. And so during the user engagement journey, customer journey, routes through a pipeline, make sure you're only answering questions about your business's data or your catalog, your pricing, not competitors' data, not allowing the user to ask any type of question. Using that RAG example I mentioned earlier, so that's a very precise answer. The last thing you want is to give an incorrect answer, especially in B2B, because sometimes these purchases are really expensive. Think about a machine. And if a customer is buying that machine based on incorrect data they got from a Gen AI chatbot, for example, that's an expensive return, and that can rack up pretty quickly. And so by deploying these pieces like the RAG and semantic vector search and storing the answers in that technology, that's going to really help kind of reduce those risks. So the key learning is, define the risks, and TCO. That seems like a couple of really key learning pieces we've learned in the past couple of years.
That's great. Anyone else?
I'd like to add that one of the lessons learned from our side has been readiness. Sometimes you're building the solution and you have a pilot and it is successful, but the users don't have the trust there yet, right? So you built something that is working, but at the end of the day, whoever is running the exercise, or for example, order automation, right? An email comes in, the order is built automatically through AI, and it should run. I mean, you should not need a human to stop it and verify it and then let it go, right? But if the humans are not comfortable that the order is going to be the way that they like it to be, then that project is not going to really give you the ROI, because you're spending the time double checking every single one of those orders anyway, plus paying for the cost of the automation. So if you don't have a team that is on board or willing to take some risk or really trying to, build some trust, it's going to be very hard and very expensive. So that is one of the lessons we learned early on. Make sure that you have the right team involved, the right champions, that the company is, willing to give it a try. Know that there's some risk involved, but build that trust a little bit faster so that the project can actually give you the return that you expect in a reasonable time.
That's great. All right. I think one last question before we wrap up, and it's how do you stay up to date on all of the Gen AI and AI news? If there's a recommendation on book, podcasts, like website, at least one. Roundtable, Roman, and it can't just from Google.
Well, you just made it super hard for me to give an answer then. This podcast is obviously a really good example, but I would say there are some very strategic industry leaders who are very vocal about where the technology is heading, and sometimes it becomes a little existential, like AGI and things like that. But many other times, it's very practical and focused on how far can you stretch a concept like just the underlying technology within an LLM, right? And what are some avenues? Is RAG sort of a band-aid solution? Is the context window going to come in and solve that? And it gets down to almost like mathematical discussions, but ultimately it affects what the possibilities are in the short term. And I feel like we're at an inflection point where the models are getting so good that you can create like a single prompt and just make it so sophisticated that it will be able to have like super high accuracy on use cases that you wouldn't have imagined before. Doing things like anomaly detection on very subtle challenges, or even like false positives on like the safety of content itself in social media, and understanding the underlying tone and message within comments of people and things like that. And so I feel like I hesitate to like name specific people, but following the right leaders in the industry, the thought leaders, is key in whatever platform you subscribe to, and just looking at how their opinions and thoughts evolve over time with technology.
Yeah, I consume my seems like most of my learnings from podcasts lately as well, past few years. And yeah, I have really techie podcasts. I have general business podcasts, like the All In podcast with these venture capitalists. I think 4 or 5 top venture capitalists, but they're in tech, and they're always talking about Claude and Perplexity and OpenAI, Microsoft, and some of the new models coming out from Meta, like Llama 3, and the quality of such. Yeah, the very high level business side. There's other great, not so techie podcasts I can recommend, like the Data Chief, and they will interview folks like head of analytics for JP Morgan, and I think the CEO of Stack Overflow was just interviewed, and they talk a lot about data and Gen AI and where it's going. And like I said earlier, I mean, it's changing every couple of months. Not just the cost, the quality, it's not just large language models, but they're having small models now. Even Apple's talking about putting a model on your phone, and it's amazing how quickly it's moving. So yeah, really interesting stuff on these podcasts.
Yeah, I'll jump in there real quick as well. I read a daily newsletter called Superhuman by Zane Khan, and that it's not super techy, but it just kind of covers things quickly. And I also listen to the All In podcast just because you're in business and it's all about tech, et cetera. But also don't underestimate some of the great thought leadership content for B2B around Gen AI coming out from some of the vendors. Obviously, LucidWorks is one, Google does some, et cetera. But there's just a lot of, if you have a tech stack, look at the software that you're using every day and try to pay attention to the webinars coming from your vendors. There's some really good research going on that are maybe less techy, more business oriented around how to make things work. And I like that.
Yeah, to tag on to what
Awesome.
Chris mentioned, webinars like this are a great source of information in a way for me to stay up to date. And I am also a fan of podcasts. That's where I get the majority of the information. I really like the TED AI show. I feel like it does a good job of kind of summarizing all the hype and everything that's happening. So that's one of my go-tos.
I love it. I love that we're all listening to podcasts. I listen to podcasts every day too. And I'm on the Marketing AI Institute. It's actually called Artificial Intelligence Institute. I love some of the things that they have there and some of their training programs and stuff, but I definitely make sure to listen to that weekly. So well, thank you so much to LucidWorks and Google for sponsoring this, but also the WBR and B2B Online team. I think that is a wrap. Thank you to all of the panelists too for jumping in and sharing your knowledge and insights.
Thank you, Teresa.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.